Hello, my name is Felicity Munro and I'm an exercise scientist in Benalla in northeast Victoria. First of all, I'd like to welcome all of you. I hope you're having a wonderful time at the conference and having a great time interacting and meeting new families. I'd also like to thank Tony for giving me the opportunity to do this video and reach out to all of you and spreading the message of to keep moving and to using exercise as a form of therapy for someone with NPC. I first came in contact with NPC back in 2012, working with Tim Lloyd, who is the son of NPC Australia President Mandy Whitechurch. Both of Mandy's boys, Tim and Matthew, have NPC, but Tim seems to be more physically affected and neurologically affected at this time than Matthew. So the majority of my work was done with Tim. Tim was referred to me as he was under the care of a physiotherapist, and at the time that was more of a rehabilitation or a therapy kind of base where the exercises really focused around fixing what Tim couldn't do. My approach as a personal trainer and as an exercise scientist is to actually focus on what someone can do, and we take into consideration all other factors. Straight off the bat, Tim and I bonded over a love of music. I'm a musician and so is Tim, and it became very clear, and Tim also articulated to me that he really wanted to be known for his music and not defined by his disease. So Tim and I first started working out at an Anytime Fitness, which is your standard 24/7 gym. We had all the standard equipment that you would have seen in a gym or fear for in a gym. And our exercise regime was really no different than that I would do with any other client. I just had considerations for what he could or couldn't do. If you've heard from Sean, or hopefully you'll be hearing from him afterwards, there's no reason why we can't strength train a client with NPC. So our programming for Tim was really general conditioning. We looked at 2 to 4 sets or rounds of using an exercise, and we did it for 10 to 15 repetitions. The motivating factor for Tim when things got hard was always the music in the background. So Tim knew every song, he knew the artist, he knew when they toured Australia or if they were coming to Australia, and if he had tickets to their concert. Overall, the theme that I keep pushing and will always push is you work with what someone can do with consideration to what they can't. With NPC, that actually varies daily. Over the time, so it's been about 7 years that I've been working with Tim, there was definitely an increase in his strength, and that became a factor. Tim's really tall, so we had to find that balance of not making him so strong that he actually became a bit of a danger if he ever had to lash out or fall, particularly for someone like Mandy, his mum, who would have to be picking him up, or for a carer, if there was a smaller carer, if Tim was too strong, that might become a bit of a danger. What we found, however, that while that was a consideration, Tim's tolerance for exercise began to decrease. So previously, where we had done 3 sets of an exercise and there would be 5 or 8 different exercises within a session, we had to reduce those number of exercises to 4, and sometimes we only got 2 rounds in. It became apparent that Tim's mood and his mental fatigue were actually the defining factor of our sessions, not his physical or muscle fatigue. So the onset of fatigue and confusion began to occur earlier in our sessions, and it also became more frequent, and it took longer to recover. So this influenced my choice of exercises, how heavy I made those exercises, the number of sets and reps that I did, and really taking into account if I noticed he was getting tired or if confusion was setting in. The exercises we actually did was a combination of machines, of body weight, and of cardiovascular fitness. When doing body weight exercises, my verbal cueing became really important. So Tim had to listen to the instructions as well as see a demonstration of those exercises to fully understand how to do them. Cardiovascular exercises became a bit of an issue as Tim's gait began to decline and his balance became a real issue. Some of the first physical progressions of NPC I noticed with Tim became the uncontrollable torso movements, or the tremors that were occurring in his upper body. What started with tremors in his arms, restricting overhead exercises, soon became apparent through his torso, so we had to keep his feet on the ground for a lot of the work that we did. There also became the inability to control eccentric lengthening. So if you think about when you're going to sit down, that last little bit of when you hit the chair, for Tim, he tends to flop. He actually can't control that lowering down. And that was the same with any exercise requiring a movement. He could push, but the pulling or the relaxing down was a lot harder to control. As fatigue set in, Tim's speech began to become affected, and he wasn't as clear to understand as previous. There was also some very definite left side deficits. So his left side was definitely weaker and more unstable than his right. I had to change the way I instructed with Tim. The visual cueing were no longer effective, and my verbal cues had to become very simple, single task, and direct. We changed a lot of our training over time with Tim, so depending on where he was in terms of decline. This is a neurological disease that is progressively degenerative. So the tremors became more pronounced. Some exercises just became really unsafe. Tim also developed a lot more confusion and inability to follow the instructions. We had to vary our exercises quite a bit, and there became that pivotal point where Tim found it difficult to multitask. So if there was a song he liked happening in the background, he found it really hard to focus on the movement. If there was something that was troubling him that he wanted to talk about, he also didn't move much at all, whereas previously that was just a part of the flow. This became probably more apparent or to the front when Tim got to that point of cognitive understanding where he expressed to me that he knew this disease was going to get him. His key for this came back to that first factor. I want to be known for my music and as a musician and a songwriter, not for my disease. Over the last 7 years with Tim, we've tried so many different forms of exercise, and it's really just trying to find what works for Tim. So we have looked at and looking to combine different factors with his OTs and his speech therapists to try and keep things in tune. So the speechies were trying to work on his breathing and his vocalizing and his ability to clear through aspirations. So we started boxing. Tim loves his boxing. With our boxing, I would try and focus on him, get him to breathe out with a strong to try and get that punching action happening. So we worked on that. We also looked at swimming. When Tim did swimming, once again, I had to try and instruct his strokes and keep him going. And then one day, just out of the blue, he gave me a bit of attitude and said, I don't know why you're saying it like that. I know how to swim, and promptly bashed out about 3 laps of freestyle or Australian crawl. The next week, he didn't know that he could swim, and we had to start again. The biggest factor that influenced Tim's progression of NPC was when he got sick. It made it harder to do his regular routine and his physical therapies. So that's when we noticed a really marked decline. If he had an illness, that isolation and the effects of that saw a massive drop down. I still work with Tim. I see him a couple of times a week, and we still do our boxing, and we still listen to music. Hopefully you've got a clip now of Tim and I in action. Once again, thank you so much for inviting me to speak at your conference. I would love to be there with you in person, believe me. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me through Tony or directly via Facebook for Future Directions Fitness, and I look forward to meeting you all hopefully one day. Thank you. Remember what we're going to do? What do we got? Jab, 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 uppercut. 2, 3, 4. Nice. Okay, have a breather.